Abdul Carter and Jaxson were supposed to be the future of the New York Giants. Instead, a heated feud between the two young stars has spiraled so badly that reports are now claiming both players have been banned. But how did a disagreement between teammates get this out of control? The New York Giants walked into the 2026 offseason with two things they had not had in years: a franchise quarterback and a franchise pass rusher, both on the same roster, both drafted in the first round of the same class. Carter and Dart were selected in the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft and are foundational young pieces to a Giants franchise looking to turn their fortunes around. On paper, these two were supposed to be the twin pillars of a rebuilding dynasty. The future was supposed to be bright. Then May 22, 2026 happened. Dart introduced Trump at festivities supporting the campaign of Rep. Mike Lawler, who represents New York's Hudson Valley in Congress and is running for a third term. It was a political event, a congressional rally in the suburbs of New York, and Dart was not just in the crowd. He stepped up to the microphone and he played a starring role. On Friday, Dart introduced President Trump at a rally in New York. He started a "Go Big Blue" chant as he addressed the crowd at the rally, before saying, "What an honor. What a privilege it is to be here." Without further ado, I'm grateful, I'm honored, I'm pleasured to introduce the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump. The moment Dart said those words, the video went viral. It spread across social media platforms within hours, racking up millions of views. Fans of the Giants were reacting. Fans of football were reacting. But perhaps the reaction nobody expected was coming from inside the building itself, from one of Dart's own teammates. On Saturday morning, Carter expressed disapproval on Twitter. Abdul Carter, the number 3 overall pick, the most electric edge rusher to come out of Penn State in a generation, did not stay quiet. He saw the video of his quarterback standing at a podium, introducing the President of the United States at a political rally, and he went straight to his phone. Teammate Abdul Carter was taken aback by Dart's polarizing decision and took to social media to criticize his quarterback. But this was AI. Carter wrote in a since-deleted post, "What we doing, man?" Those 9 words, short, sharp, and loaded, detonated across the internet like a grenade. Abdul Carter, one of the most talked about defensive players in the entire league, was publicly calling out his own starting quarterback. Not in a team meeting, not through back channels, on X, for the world to see. And just like that, what should have been a quiet Memorial Day weekend for the New York Giants became one of the most talked about stories in the entire NFL. The reaction was instantaneous. The internet did not merely notice, it erupted. New Orleans Saints defensive end Cam Jordan responded to a social media post with sounds about Ole Miss, referring to Dart's alma mater. That was just the beginning. The story was already jumping from the Giants' locker room to locker rooms across the league. Multiple sources told ESPN that the original plan for last week did not involve Dart introducing the president. But the plan changed along the way. Coach John Harbaugh said he only knew that Dart was supposed to meet the president. That detail is important. This was not a calculated, coordinated move by the Giants organization. Dart's role escalated beyond what anyone in the building had been told to expect. And that escalation is what set everything else into motion. Giants QB Jaxson Dart's Trump rally introduction sparked teammate Abdul Carter's criticism, which he then deleted, but not before drawing a rebuke from radio host Boomer Esiason. The media was now fully engaged. The story had officially crossed from the locker room to the national conversation, and it was not going back. Carter had already emerged as a burgeoning star, finishing 5th among edge rushers in pass rush win rate in 2025, per ESPN. Dart, meanwhile, showed signs of becoming the team's quarterback of the future. After a promising rookie campaign saw him flash his abilities as a runner and passer, while leading the offense. He completed 63.7% of his passes while throwing for 2,272 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. 2 cornerstone players. 1 social media post. 1 match dropped into a locker room full of tension, politics, and 53 different men with 53 different opinions on the President of the United States. The Giants were no longer just a football story. They were a cultural flashpoint. And things were about to get far more complicated before they would get better. When the Giants players and coaches arrived back at the facility after the Memorial Day weekend, there was no pretending that nothing had happened. The video of Dart at the podium had been seen by everyone. Carter's tweet had been seen by everyone. The silence of Monday had simply allowed the pressure to build. And now, with everyone back in the same building, something had to give. This led the Giants to have a team meeting on Wednesday. where players could discuss the situation. NFL media reported that notable figures such as Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jameis Winston spoke, with the Giants looking to move forward. That list of names alone tells you everything about the weight of this moment. These were not role players or bench warmers quietly voicing concerns. These were the senior voices of the locker room, established veterans, Pro Bowl caliber players, all feeling the need to step into this conversation and say something. Giants quarterback Jaxson addressed teammates during a Tuesday meeting to discuss his introduction of President Donald Trump at an event last week in Suffern, New York. NFL Network insiders Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo reported. So before the full team meeting even happened, Dart was already standing up in front of his teammates and speaking. That is not a small thing. That is a young quarterback just 13 months into his NFL career, being forced to address the most sensitive topic in American public life in front of his entire roster. The weight of that moment on a 22-year-old is hard to overstate. One topic that was reportedly discussed was about players keeping team issues in-house and not putting them out in public, like Carter did with his social media post. So the team was not just grappling with the politics of Dart's appearance at the rally. They were also grappling with the question of whether Carter had crossed a line by making it public. Two separate fault lines cracking beneath the same locker room floor at the same time. The Giants were back together on Wednesday for organized team activities, and Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Jameis Winston were reportedly among the players who also spoke during the meeting. According to ESPN's Jordan Rannon, three of the most respected voices in that building, men who had been in the league longer than Carter and Dart combined, all felt the need to address the room. That speaks to how raw and real this situation had become inside the facility. And then there was Jameis Winston, a 12-year NFL veteran, a Super Bowl contender from his prime years in Tampa, a man who had seen locker rooms fracture catastrophically. Winston did not stand at the back of the room and watch. Abdul, Carter, Jameis Winston, and head coach John Harbaugh spoke about how the Giants were affected by QB Jaxson introducing President Trump at a recent rally, and how the teammates worked together to respect each other's views and feelings in order to move ahead and succeed as a team. Winston, in particular, reportedly framed the moment as a teachable one, the kind of adversity that either breaks a young team or forges it into something tighter and more resilient. After Carter's post, there was discussion about what that might do to the Giants' locker room chemistry. But offensive lineman Jermaine Eloimanor posted on X to try and ease tensions, another sign that the ripple effect of this moment was touching everyone in the building, not just the two men at the center of it. In the middle of all this internal turbulence, Carter himself tried to cut the narrative off at the knees. He went back to social media, the same platform where the whole thing started, and tried to de-escalate. Last week, Carter quickly looked to squash any narratives that were forming about locker room division. Not only did he delete his initial post criticizing Dart, but he also posted "Me JD6 are good. We spoke earlier as men. Y'all can keep y'all narratives." However, Carter ended up deleting that post as well, deleting both posts. That detail is significant. Carter initially went public with his frustration, then tried to publicly walk it back, then deleted the walk back too. It suggests a man who was genuinely conflicted, not just about the politics, but about how much of this belonged in the public eye at all. The internal tug of war between what Carter believed and what Carter felt he owed his team was playing out in real time, right there on his profile page. Dart's appearance at the May 22 rally prompted Carter to post a critical message on social media the following day. They then talked and ironed out their differences according to Carter, but the team still held a meeting Tuesday morning in which Dart and several team leaders addressed the room. So by the time the full team meeting was happening, Carter and Dart had already spoken privately, man to man. The public drama had a private resolution happening underneath it, but the locker room still needed to process it collectively. The New York Giants had never faced anything quite like this before. Not under this coaching staff, not with this roster. And how they handled the next 72 hours was going to define whether this was a moment that strengthened their bond or began to quietly unravel it. By the time the story broke wide open over Memorial Day weekend, every sports media outlet in the country had already picked a side. This was not just an NFL story anymore. This was a story about politics, about race, about the responsibility of athletes and public figures, about what it means to represent an entire franchise when you walk up to a microphone at a political event. Some liberal sites wrung their hands about the fact the starting quarterback of an NFL legacy franchise would dare introduce the President of the United States at a rally, while conservative voices were defending Dart's right to do so, and ripping Carter a new one for going public with his criticism of a teammate. The media coverage split almost perfectly along political lines, which meant the story was no longer just about two Giants teammates having a disagreement. The former Cincinnati Bengals and New York Jets quarterback hosts the Boomer and Geo show on WFAN in New York. And because Tuesday was the show's first day back from the long Memorial Day weekend when the whole Dart Carter saga happened, Jaxson got his first crack at addressing the issue. And Boomer Esiason did not hold back. This was a real error on the part of Abdul Carter, not on the part of Jaxson Dart. Esiason said on air, Jaxson Dart was asked to introduce the President of the United States. How many people get an opportunity to do something like that, regardless of who the president is? Esiason's take was clear and sharp. Dart had an opportunity that most people would never get, and Carter had no business taking that public. In Boomer's world, you keep team business inside the team. Boomer Esiason gets called out for his attack on Abdul Carter for using social media to express his disapproval of Jaxson Dart. The NFL world did not simply let Esiason's take slide unchallenged. The response to his comments on social media was fierce, with many people pushing back on the idea that Carter, a black man who had strong feelings about a polarizing political figure, should have simply stayed quiet. Critics called Esiason out of touch, arguing that he was holding Carter to a standard that he would never apply to a white quarterback, who had done the same thing in support of a Democratic politician. You may have hated Barack Obama, you may have hated Joe Biden, and some guys didn't want to go to the White House because they didn't like those presidents, just like other guys didn't want to go to the White House because they didn't like President Trump. That was Esiason's follow-up, attempting to make the argument symmetrical. But critics argued the situations were not comparable, and that argument became one of the central debates of the entire news cycle. Many of the reactions were predictably hypocritical. They were wagging a finger at Carter for reacting to Dart's unforced error, and they were ignoring the fact that Dart lit the fuse on all of this. NBC Sports made the point that this entire saga began with a decision that Dart made. A decision that, by multiple accounts, was not fully anticipated by the organization, and that Carter reacting to that decision was not entirely unreasonable. Donald Trump couldn't stop raving about Jaxson Dart after the New York Giants quarterback introduced him at a recent rally. Trump himself got in on the commentary, which only amplified the story further and dragged it even deeper into the political sphere. At this point, the President of the United States was publicly commenting on an NFL quarterback, which meant the Giants' locker room drama was now a White House story too. And through all of this noise, through every take and counter-take, and radio segment and tweet thread, the two men at the center of it, Carter and Dart, were sitting in the same team meetings, running the same drills, preparing for the same season. The question everyone was really asking was not who was right and who was wrong. The question was, can this franchise hold together when the pressure is real? What role, if any, did Harbaugh have in getting the fences mended? These are all fair questions, because the answers will shed plenty of light on whether the hatchet is truly buried or whether they merely kicked the can for the good of the team. That skepticism was everywhere. Nobody was fully convinced that a couple of deleted tweets and a closed-door meeting had actually resolved anything. The franchise's newest chapter was being written in real time, and it was not the chapter anyone had scripted. When the Giants finally made their players available to reporters, the entire sports world was watching. This was not a routine Friday OTA media availability. This was one of the most anticipated press conferences the New York Giants had hosted in years. Because somewhere between a political rally in Suffern, New York, and a string of deleted tweets, two of the most talented young players in the NFL had turned a football story into a national conversation. New York Giants quarterback Jaxson Dart and outside linebacker Abdul Carter continued to clear the air with one another as well as with their teammates following Dart's participation in a political rally last weekend, in which he introduced President Donald J. Trump, a decision that prompted Carter to take to social media to question his teammates' action. On Friday, following the team's 6th OTA practice, the two players took to the podium to offer insight into their respective thinking. The quarterback opened with a statement in which he explained his support for the office of the president, and that he was grateful for the chance to take part in the event. This was a unique opportunity being asked and given the opportunity to introduce the President of the United States. Dart said, "My thinking was pretty simple in the fact of I've always loved this country. I have extended family members who have fought in wars. So, the president position has always been a position that I've well respected, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of political party, and my intentions were just that." Dart spoke Friday in a rather melancholic tone that seemed different from his usual brash delivery. This was not the confident, sometimes cocky second-year quarterback that Giants fans had come to know. This was a young man who had walked into the middle of something much larger than a football game and was now reckoning with the weight of it. His 3-plus-minute statement was measured, careful, and notably reflective. He noted his respect for the presidential position, regardless of political affiliation, and his long family military history. Dart was trying to frame his decision not as a political endorsement, but as an act of patriotism rooted in family tradition. Whether that framing landed with his teammates was a separate question entirely. Then Carter stepped to the podium, and he did not apologize. Talking after Friday's OTA practice, Carter wasn't apologetic for what he said. However, he made it clear it hasn't affected his relationship with Dart. Carter's statement was direct and layered. He owned his reaction to Dart's appearance at the rally, explained why he felt compelled to speak, and drew a clear line between his political convictions and his personal relationship with his quarterback. Some things are bigger than football, and this is one of those things. He went further, saying that as the face of the franchise, Dart carries a responsibility that extends beyond himself. That when you wear the Giants' #1 jersey and you step to a microphone at a political rally, you are not just speaking for yourself. Carter said Dart did not apologize to him, nor did the quarterback have any reason to. "No, I don't want him to say he's sorry," Carter said. "Like, stand on what you believe in, but it can't be a problem when I stand on what I believe." That line was perhaps the most powerful thing Carter said all day. He was not asking Dart to recant. He was not asking for an apology. He was asking for the same right to stand on his own convictions that Dart had exercised when he walked onto that stage. Abdul Carter says he will only address Jaxson Dart, introducing Donald Trump once. Coach Harbaugh said, "It was really a good opportunity for us as a football team to have these kind of conversations around a real-life incident. We're in a good place now, and we're moving forward." Harbaugh's framing was characteristic of the way he has always approached high-pressure situations, turning adversity into a team-building exercise, refusing to let a difficult moment become a defining wound. Dart added that some productive conversations amongst Giants players have come out of this situation. "We have a real brotherhood. We've had a lot of honest conversations with each other as a team, and I'd like to keep those things private between me and my teammates." Carter, who was seen embracing Dart during Friday's workout, made it clear he isn't looking for Dart to apologize. The image that would become the defining visual of this entire saga was the moment Carter and Dart embraced publicly after the press conference. Two young men who had disagreed in front of millions of people, pulling each other close and signaling to the world that the team came first. Whether the internet believed it or not was another matter entirely. Now that the press conferences are done, the tweets are deleted, and the hugs have been photographed, it is worth stepping back and asking the question that this entire saga has really been circling. What does all of this actually mean? Not just for Carter and Dart, not just for the Giants, but for the NFL, for sports, and for the way we talk about athletes and politics in 2026. The title of this story uses a very specific word, banned, and that word demands an honest answer. Giants teammates Jaxson Dart and Abdul Carter expressed solidarity Friday, following their disagreement over the quarterback's involvement in an event for President Donald Trump. There was no formal ban. There was no league discipline. There was no suspension from OTAs. What happened between Abdul Carter and Jaxson Dart was a public social media skirmish that escalated into a national conversation. But when the smoke cleared, both men were still showing up to practice, still running the same plays, and still preparing for the same season together. The word ban that lit up headlines and thumbnails and took the internet by storm, it tells you more about the temperature of the moment than it does about the facts. In an era where every athlete's social media post is dissected in real time, where political allegiances can turn a teammate into a headline, the distance between a deleted tweet and a ban is filled entirely by the outrage machine that modern sports media has become. But stripping away the hyperbole does not strip away the substance. 3 days after addressing his teammates, New York Giants quarterback Jaxson spoke to the media regarding his decision to introduce President Donald Trump at a rally last week, with teammate Abdul also speaking and indicating he felt obligated to call out Dart. That is real. The team meeting happened. The conversations happened. The fracture, however briefly it opened, was real. Carter and Dart were taken in the 2025 NFL Draft's first round, with Carter selected number 3 overall out of Penn State, and Dart picked 25th out of Ole Miss after New York traded back into the opening round to draft him. These two men were supposed to be the foundation of something special, a franchise rebuild built on youth, talent, and a shared hunger for winning, and in many ways they still are. But the Dart-Carter saga has revealed something important. The Giants' locker room is not a vacuum. It is filled with real people, holding real beliefs, navigating the same divided country that the rest of us live in. Carter participated in all 17 games in 2025 with 6 starts, as he recorded 43 tackles, 4 sacks, and 23 QB hits. Dart played in 14 games as a rookie with 12 starts, throwing for 2,272 yards and 15 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, with an additional 487 yards and 9 touchdowns rushing. By the numbers, both of these players delivered in their first NFL seasons. The question going into year 2 is whether the team around them has the chemistry to compete. And this situation, whatever it truly was, has become the first real test of that chemistry. Backup quarterback Jameis Winston, a 12-year NFL veteran, shared his veteran perspective as for how valuable it can be for two guys entering their second seasons to come out the other side of something like this. Winston's framing is ultimately the most useful one. Teams that can have hard conversations and come out the other side intact tend to be tougher when it matters. The Giants did not break. The question is whether they bent enough to leave a mark. The Giants have had a strong offseason overall, which started with bringing in John Harbaugh as the team's new coach, and, most recently, extending general manager Joe Schoen on a multi-year deal. That context matters too. This is a franchise that brought in John Harbaugh, one of the most respected coaches in NFL history, specifically to build a winning culture from the foundation up. How Harbaugh manages the aftermath of this moment, how he keeps both Carter and Dart focused and bonded through the rest of OTAs and into training camp, will be one of the most closely watched coaching assignments of the summer. What the Carter-Dart saga has ultimately proven is something that every generation of athlete has had to learn in their own way. You cannot separate sports from the world that surrounds it. The game is played by human beings with convictions and histories and communities they care about. When one of them walks to a microphone at a political rally, and another responds on social media, the story does not stay in the locker room. It floods out into a country that is already primed to be inflamed. The ban never happened. The fight, in the traditional sense, never happened. What happened was a disagreement between two young men who are going to be playing football together for potentially the next decade, and who had to figure out, in public, in front of millions of people, how to hold on to each other while holding on to themselves. That is not a football story. That is a human one. And for better or worse, it is the story the New York Giants are carrying into the 2026 NFL season.